Finally, all the Gen Con board game coverage is over. A dog might have weed on this lamppost, but I don't care, because Mansions of Madness review, done. Seafall First Impressions, done. Captain Sonar review, done. That's it, there's no more Gen Con board games to review, so I can just rest and sleep. Hype is a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, when this game was announced, I didn't pay any attention to Cry Havoc, and there are a couple of reasons for why this game didn't excite me for any reason whatsoever. First, it looked like a miniature combat game because it had a lot of miniatures in it. Second, it had this cover of this space dude, which pretty much looks like a AAA computer game, much like this one. And third of all, the title didn't. What does Cry Havoc even mean? I think in Shakespearean it means let's it up. But now that I've said it, I realize I'll have to bleep it out. So when I say let's I did it again. But when the reviews for this thing started coming out, I couldn't help but be excited. You see, most reviewers compared this game to games like Comet or Forbidden Stars or Blood Rage, and two out of those three games I really like. And I don't just like them because they're games about very important men fighting very important battles and very important terrain. No, I like them because they're innovative in how they deliver those mechanics to you, and they make the gameplay and competition exciting because it provides you a lot of decisions and a challenge. You really want to defeat your opponents. That's great. So Cry Havoc has a lot to live up to, and let me be one of the few people to say that this game is pretty hot. And by that I mean it's a hot mess. A bit like my hair. But let's not get off the hype train yet, because this ride is just beginning. You see, one of the great things about Cry Havoc is just how much you get right from the start in this box. It's full of components. And it's not just this gorgeous, large, double-sided board that you get inside of it, but it's just a whole box full of things, whether it's miniatures or crystals that you really just kind of want to eat one by one. They look delicious. Or you get these nice buildings, and this is really where the detail to attention comes along, because they just slot together nicely. It's very aesthetically pleasing, and this attention to detail kind of just shines through the entire game in terms of its production quality, and that's nice. That's very nice, but it's just nice. When you Cry and you Havoc, you will mostly be doing so with cards, and every faction gets a deck of 8 to start with, and you will draw 4 at the beginning of every round, and that's pretty much the only resource in Cry Havoc that you have. You have crystals as well, but ironically, you can't actually buy anything with them. Anything you want to do in Cry Havoc requires you spending these cards, and they're multi-use, which is great, which is what I like about any game that has cards, that you can use cards in different ways, because they give you decisions. So let's walk through a little bit what you're actually going to do here. Doing things in Cry Havoc is streamlined and simple, much like a baby. Now, whenever you want to do anything, you discard any number of cards that you want, and each card has possible 3 different types of symbols: movement, recruitment, and building. Now, whenever you discard a card or multiples of cards, you add up all the symbols together for the type of action that you want to do. So let's say I want to do movement and discard these 2 cards. I will get a total of 3 movement points, and then I can move 3 guys 1 space, or 1 guy 3 space. It's movement. It's pretty simple. You get points, use them for movement. That's it. Recruitment works in the exact same way. Discard any number of cards that you want, and then recruit that many units onto your faction headquarters right there. And that's really it. Building is a bit more complicated. You discard some cards, you get building points, and then you can build the buildings, and then you can spend points to activate those buildings, to make those buildings do things. But really, that's it. And that's nice. That's elegant, and it's easy to explain, and it's a good thing. What's not so good is that when you get these cards, there isn't often a choice in how you're going to spend them, because let's look at this card, for example. It's obvious I'm never going to spend it for building, because if I spend it for movement or for recruitment, I simply get more out of this card. So the decision, it's taken away from 3 to 2, and some cards are like that, where you're obviously going to spend it on building because that's all you're going to be doing, and then no matter what these cards are in your hand, you're just not going to build with them because you already have all the building points you need right here. And for lack of a better word, that's
boring. In games like Komet or Blood Rage, the factions you start with are completely identical but distinguish themselves throughout the course of the game, whereas in Cry Havoc, you have complete asymmetry from the get-go. All the factions are unique and have a completely different playstyle, like the humans who like to occupy things. It's a big surprise. There are machines that have a lot of different buildings and they are very good at killing enemy units, or pilgrims that have 4 arms. That's a unique skill, and also they're pretty good at taking crystals from the board and using them in different ways.
So why do you do the things that you do in Cry Havoc? Well, you do them for crystals. You see, crystals are one of the primary ways of scoring victory points in Cry Havoc. The other way being controlling territories on the map, but that happens less frequently. So when you move your dudes onto an area, and if it has any of these tokens, you will immediately resolve them at the end of the movement. And if you have an event token, it might say things like add a couple of crystals into that area, which means great, that area already has 4 crystals. But you also have Trogg tokens. And what are Troggs? No, they're a neutral faction that you don't control in a 2 to 3 player game. You simply have your opponents control them in fights. But more importantly, in a 4 player game, they become an actual playable faction. How cool is that? Playing the neutral faction? Whoever thought of that? Genius. Well done. But Trogg tokens will basically say, hey, add a couple of Troggs here, and they might say, add a couple of crystals here. That's 6 if you're counting. And here's the final kicker. Because you have 2 different opposing faction plastic miniatures in one area, that becomes a battle area. And because it's a battle area, when everyone's done doing their things and done doing their actions, you will be resolving battles. And the first thing you do in every battle, you put another crystal into every battle area. That's 7. And 7 is a lot. You see, when you start the game, there aren't really that many areas that have crystals, and the ones that are there, they only have a couple aside from the middle one, which no one can kind of get to in a 2 to 3 player game because it's right at the center, and all these Trogg tokens will block your movement and not allow you to pass through. So getting to it is really hard. So what happens here is that we have very few strategically valuable areas at the start of the game, but wherever you move into, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You suddenly make that area valuable simply by making a fight there. So everyone's going to be wanting to make as many fights as possible, and that's great. That's what you want in an area control game with miniatures on a map. You want them to fight, and you want incentives to actually go out and do things rather than just building things on your board. I like that, and I like that the map is dynamic in different games in that way. One area might not be powerful at all, but then you go there, and it is. It's just genius. Hey kids, let's go to battle, because battle is one of the things that I got really excited about when I found out a little bit more about Cry Havoc. First of all, no dice, great, right? Second thing, you have 3 separate different battle areas. This battle area determines who will actually control the area that you're fighting for. This will let you take prisoners from the opposing enemy troops that you're fighting with. And this will finally let you kill any opposing unit that is participating in the battle and get 1 victory point for killing that unit. So if you think you can win this battle, and by win I mean dominate the area that you're fighting for, you will plonk all your miniatures down here. And after you've done plonking, then your opponent gets to plonk as well. And they might do something like that, where they know that they can't win because 4 versus 2 doesn't really add up. So what they're going to do is they're going to try and capture one of your units and then kill another one of your units. And capturing units is great because you're basically denying them that unit. That goes away and it belongs to them, and it will score them 1 point at the end of every round. And also, you can't buy it. It's gone. He's gone. Oh, so sad. Here's the thing about battles, though. Like choosing what cards you're going to play in a game of Cry Havoc, battles seem to work on autopilot. You pretty much can map out exactly the outcome of the battle, and you know where to place your miniatures for the best outcome. The only thing that kind of breaks it apart is, once again, these cards. You see, some of these cards are not just used for the top abilities to move or recruit or whatever. Some of them have a battle ability, and you can discard them for that battle ability. And if you're the attacker, you have to be the first person to discard a card or pass, and then you're unable to discard any more cards. And if you're the defender, then you're the second, and you keep discarding them one at a time, and you can do useful things like moving one miniature from one battle area to another, drastically changing the potential outcome. But even with these cards, you often don't feel like you have a lot of decisions. Some cards, you will just know that you want to discard them for other things like movement, because you feel like the battle ability that it adds is not necessarily one that you want to save the card for. You'd rather enable actions with it. Whereas others that let you recruit a new unit onto the battle objective are obviously worth playing, because they're so much better than just recruiting, because you don't have to move the unit, because when you recruit them, they go directly to your headquarters. So if you're battling somewhere like over there, that is 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces of movement that you've saved just by discarding that card in battle. I wish there was more going on here. I really do. I haven't even mentioned everything about this game yet. Like the fact that it has a Monaco. Maybe this is like no. What this game does have, however, is these extra cards. You see, secretly, Cry Havoc has a deck building element. So when I said you start with 8 cards, it doesn't mean that that deck isn't going to get bigger through the course of the game. And as you keep drawing them, you can also buy new cards, and they do different things. And the board tells you exactly what they do. They might be good at recruiting, they might be good at moving, they might be really good at building, or they might let you cycle through your deck faster. However, unlike other deck building games, you don't really have any opportunities to get rid of cards unless you're a specific faction from your deck. You see, whatever you buy, you keep it, and it goes into your deck forever, and you will keep drawing it eventually. So this element actually kind of works really well. And I'm a guy who doesn't normally like deck building, but I like the fact that in this area control game, you have to very carefully think about what cards you're going to be buying, because they will stick with you for the rest of the game. And you better make those decisions right, even though you don't know how those decisions will affect the rest of the game. And yet the weirdest mechanism in Cry Havoc is this victory point track that has event tokens on it. You see, at the start of the round, you will resolve the next available event token, and it'll simply say to do a thing, and you'll do the thing. But the thing is, as your victory point tracker goes along the board, if at any point it surpasses an event token, then that event token will move down the line and stack itself onto a pile, meaning that the next time you resolve an event, you'll resolve 2 instead. And that's kind of neat, right? But here's the real kicker. These event tokens are also round trackers. So whenever you remove one event token, that's one less round in the game. So when you start the game, you think there are 5 rounds. But if one of you is doing really, really well, then there will be 4 rounds. Or maybe even 3. And I don't understand why that exists. And that might just be me being very dense and not getting it. But all I can come up with, and this is me honestly, is if one of you is doing really, really well and beating on other players, then the game will end sooner. That's all I've got. And then there are balance issues. Now, I don't really normally comment on balance issues in our reviews because I feel it's a bit presumptuous to say that our experience can define whether this game is balanced or not. But we feel like a lot of people have come out on Board Game Geek and said similar things. Now, they also might be in their first games and just experiencing the game and not having really come to terms with everything that you can do. And there is a lot you can do in this game. We all might be collectively wrong, but I'll get to that in a little bit. A lot of people said in a 2 or 3 player game, the human building card called Airfield is just overpowered because what it lets you do is effectively it lets you take control of an opposing area. So if I had an airfield right here, I can simply activate it, and that area now belongs to me. On top of that, the Trog token, an event token, is still there. And if there are multiple Trog tokens, which might happen because of Trog units retreating and reverting into random tokens, suddenly I have a very well defended area that I haven't spent units to actually take over. And I haven't spent units to populate it with opposing enemy forces. That is super strong, but coupled with its skill. See, I haven't mentioned skills because every player gets 1, 2, or 3 random skills at the start of the game. You decide on the number and everyone gets an equal amount. And if you're only playing with one skill, you always get the default one. And this default human skill is the one that makes everyone feel like it is really strong, because all you have to do is you have to discard one card and you score victory points equal to the number of areas you control. Paired with an airfield that lets you take over any area that doesn't really have opposing enemy miniatures, suddenly you have all the areas, you're discarding cards and you're scoring victory points. None of the other factions have anything similar to that. They have other abilities, but they don't normally involve giving you victory points. They just do different things. And the game's asymmetric nature means that it's really hard to catch up to humans. And then again, in a 4-player game, we feel like the Troggs are overly strong and they have an advantage. Now, some of the publishers and designers have come out and said, hey, that's not necessarily true. You might have not experienced all the depth of the game that they has to offer, and maybe we'll post some articles that tell you how to play certain factions better. And that's fine, except I still have to do a lot of work to get to the point where the game starts to feel balanced for me and everyone else involved around the table. I don't want to do that work. I really hate to say this, but it's not very fun.
And when I say I hate to say this, I really mean I hate to say this, because, you see, I can tell just how much love, care, detail, and attention came to publishing and designing this game. It looks gorgeous and everything, it just feels unique and nice, and there are a lot of really cool ideas in this game that don't feel quite like they come together very well. It seems like there's a good game underneath here, hiding somewhere, but I can't find it no matter how hard I try. And that makes me feel kind of sad. You see, there's this other thing about Cry Havoc that I haven't mentioned yet. It has 3 designers, but the peculiar thing is that the game was designed by Grant Rodiak and then passed on to 2 other designers from Portal Games, who then worked on it independently on their own. And Terry Gilliam said this thing famously, camel is just a horse designed by a committee, and I can't help but feel that this is very true of Cry Havoc. And it feels rushed, it feels slightly underdeveloped, it feels slightly unbalanced. It doesn't have a very cohesive rulebook that explains the game very well. It explains the basic rules, but it doesn't really explain the rules details that come to all the different buildings and asymmetric powers that your factions have. So, in the end, as much as I regret to say it, I think a lot of Portal Games, I think a lot of Ignacy as a publisher, and I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed.
My mama cooks in Italy, mama swims in Argentina, mama's got a chunga, My mama's works in Venezuela, mama likes Cinderella, mama's got a chunga,